Hey guys, welcome to Advanced Genetics. This is a little bit more complicated than what we've talked about before with just plain old Mendelian genetics. So let's get started. In the past, we've learned about dominant and recessive alleles, and they were pretty simple. We learned that brown eyes can be dominant to blue eyes and that curly hair can be dominant to straight hair. But how do we explain things like hazel eyes down here, or wavy hair, where it's not really straight and it's not really curly, it's somewhere in between? Well, one way that we can get a mix of traits is something called polygenic traits. And what polygenic means is traits, or genes, here we have genic, genes, that are located in several locations. So they are polygenic, genes that are located in several locations. And it's several genes that will code for the same trait, and that will give us kind of a mix of the traits that are there. So some examples of this are eye color, height, and weight. And if we look down here, you'll see that there are several genes on several different chromosomes that will all code for a single trait, and that is what polygenic is. Another thing that can explain mixed traits is something called incomplete dominance. And this is when one allele is not completely dominant over another. So what ends up happening is we get this blend. Now I know that we said that blending is not correct according to what Mendel studied, but there is actually cases where the two traits will blend when both genotypes are present, and that is during incomplete dominance. So here's a perfect example of incomplete dominance. We have a red plant that is coded for by CR, the alleles, and we have a white plant whose alleles are CW. And when we cross those, we get 100% CW. And you can see that what we get phenotypically is a pink plant, which is a cross between a white and a red. And the traits do blend. So if we do a practice problem, we want to know what the potential offspring is when we cross a pink snapdragon and a white snapdragon. Well, as you hopefully saw in the previous slide, a pink snapdragon is represented by CW, and a white snapdragon is represented by CW. Okay, so I'll let you do that cross on your own. Just pause the video for a second and give it a try and see what your results are. Another thing that can explain different types of traits is codominance. And this is when both alleles are expressed together at the same time. It is slightly different from incomplete dominance in the fact that incomplete dominance, the traits blend, whereas in codominance, both traits are expressed at the same time. An example of this is seen in cows. It can also be seen in horses. It's not very common in humans, but I will talk about a trait that in humans codominance applies to. But for now, let's just stick to cows. So cows can come in white, which are coded for by CW. They can come in red, which would be CR, or they can be roan, which is CWCR. I'll explain that as soon as you see the pictures. So here we have a red cow. I know it looks brown, but it's red. And here we have a white cow. And when they are crossed together, we end up getting a roan cow. It's roan because it expresses both white and red at the same time. And you can see how it's different from incomplete dominance in the fact that the colors did not blend. They are both expressed. White is expressed and brown is expressed at the same time. So here again we have a practice problem. I'll get you set up and then you should pause the video and give it a try for yourself. But a white cow would be CW, CW, and a roan cow is CR, CW. So give that a try and see what your results are. Sometimes different traits can be explained by using what's called multiple alleles. And this is where a gene can get several different alleles on it. So we still, if these are our 2 chromosomes, and this is our gene, we still only get 2 genes. However, there's more than 2 alleles that could be inherited here. So a perfect example in humans is human blood type. And the types of blood that we can have are A, B, or O. We're going to go into great detail with this. So as I said before, I was going to give you an example in humans of codominance, and blood type is a perfect example. When a person inherits the allele for A and they inherit the allele for B, they end up getting the blood type AB. Okay, so both A and B are dominant, and when those 2 alleles are inherited together, we get both alleles and they are both expressed. So this means that O is recessive. Okay, so if an O allele is inherited with an A is dominant. And if an O allele is inherited with a B is dominant. And as you can see down here, if the A and B allele are inherited, both the A and B antigen are present on the blood cells. So we need to know how the alleles for each of these are written. And the letter that we use for these alleles is I. And we use a superscript on A and B to indicate which gene it is, the A allele or the B allele. So A is written as IA, B is written as IB, and O is actually written as little I. So before we move on, we need to talk about the possible genotypes in order to receive blood type A. And there are 2 of them. And you definitely need to write these down. It can be IA, or someone with blood type A could have IA, little I. Okay, so we have 2 dominant alleles here to get an A, or we have the dominant allele A with the recessive allele, little I. It's very similar for blood type B, IB, or IB, little I. And in order to get blood type O, we can only have one genotype for this, and that is little I, because O blood type is recessive. So here you can see a Punnett Square where it's taking all the alleles and crossing them together so you can see the possible phenotypes. If we cross IA, we get blood type A. Okay, if we cross little I, we get blood type O. And you should pause the video and take a few minutes to look this over. So let's do a quick practice. I will set you up, and then I'd like you to pause the video again and give it a try on your own. So a man with blood type AB marries a woman with blood type O. What are their possibilities? Well, AB blood type would be coded for by the codominant alleles IA and IB. And then to have blood type O, as we determined, would be little I. And now you can do the cross and determine the blood types of their children. This is where it gets a little trickier. Okay, is it possible for a man with type A blood and a woman with type B blood to have a child with type O blood? Well, first we have to figure out, okay, if they have blood type A, what are the possible genotypes? And as we determined a few slides ago, that could be IA, or IA little I. And to have blood type B, same thing, IB, or IB little I. Now you can save yourself a lot of work here just by looking and thinking. If we need to get a child with blood type O, what are the alleles that this child would need to have? They would need to have little I, little I. So instead of doing all 4 crosses between IA and IB, IA, IB little I, and IA little I, IB, IA little I, and IB little I, we just look, okay, what do the alleles need to be to get a child with blood type O? Well, ask yourself, if one of the parents has these genotypes, is it possible to make a child with a little I? No, it is not, so we rule that out. Same thing here. If the parent has IB, is it possible to make a child with a little I? And no, again, it's not. So what we're left with is the parents to have IA little I and IB little I. And that cross will give us a child with type O blood, and then you should show it in a Punnett Square in order to defend your answer. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation on advanced genetics, and make sure you've written down any questions to ask me in class.